So to help us understand this threat that is critical race theory, Charles Love is here. He's the host of the Charles Love Show on AM 560 in Chicago, and he's got a new book coming out this fall called Race Crazy. Mr. Love, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Really good to talk to you. So give me the elevator pitch, right? So if I'm talking to a regular person who doesn't pay attention to politics, this person doesn't listen to your show or watch this show or really pay much attention to anything in the news, right? They've never heard of critical race theory. It sounds benign. It sounds like nothing. And of course, it's pitched as, love and tolerance and acceptance and all these things, right? What's your 60-second pitch about what critical race theory really is?
Well, I'm glad you want to start with that approach, because that's what's important. There's too many people who aren't listening, and you say that those parents at the school boards are getting upset and speaking out, and it's good. We need more of them. And most don't, because they don't know what it is. So what it is basically racism with a twist in that the people who are proponents get to pick who is the special class and who gets discriminated against. They do it under the guise of equality, not true, equity, trying to even the playing field. But the problem is the approach is immoral, illegal, unfair, and morally unjust. And it's obvious that you can get that and gather that if you read the tenets of the theory. And it's important to do so because the counterpoint to many of those people, they'll say the people who are arguing against it simply twist their words and don't understand what they mean, and we're changing the meaning. It's not a political thing, and it shouldn't be a political opposition. It is a moral thing. And what they want to say, first of all, is that race is integral into everything. Racism is endemic. So that means that it's everywhere and it's constant. So if you're black or some other minority, that you have to deal with this racism every day, all day. Now, that alone is untrue, because if you talk to the average person on the street, like you're talking about, if you talk to the average black person, some of them believe this in theory and some don't. But if they're honest and you say, when was the last time something like this happened to you? Many people can't really mention a time. Or they do these weird things, like I got on the elevator one day and a woman came on after me and she said, 7th floor, please. So that's the example of racism. So it's endemic, but they consider everything racist. So of course it's endemic if you think somebody giving you bad service at a store is racist. So that's part of it. And then the other part is they think that there is standpoint epistemology, meaning that only black people, because they're black, have the experiences and the know-how to talk about race. So they pretty much crowd out every other argument. So where does that leave you if you're not black?
Yeah, you can't say anything. And if you white person deny I'm racist, that's proof of my racism.
Yeah.
And any reaction I have is my fragility, and that's their silencing technique. It's brilliant, actually. You got to give them credit.
Right,
for
because
it.
You can't argue against it.
Yep. I want to go back in time a little bit here, but before we do that, can you give us a couple more examples of what this looks like? Either in regular life or specifically in schools, which is one of the main focuses of today's special too. But what does this look like in school?
Give you regular life in school really quickly. Regular life would be, because one of the other tenets is that blacks cannot achieve like the American dream or can't get equality unless they do it en masse, and if what they want is aligned with whiteness. So the only reason, so that's the way they argue out all the people on the right who will say, well, look at LeBron, look at Oprah. They'll say, yeah, those people made it, but that's only because white people can benefit from what they're doing. So if I can make a lot of money as a white person, then I'll let LeBron get rich even though I'm a racist. The problem with that, you can't prove a negative. So if that's true for the white racist, but it's also true for the white person who's not a racist, and it's true for a black person. If a black man owns a business, he will do what's best in his business interest. So it has nothing to do with race, but it's kind of hard to argue against it. And in the schools, what they're doing is they're saying stuff like, we've heard the white privilege for the last year, you've heard that. But now they're trying to, bring it down to the younger level and say in class, for instance, well, this oppression is endemic and is everywhere. So to fix it, we have to address it everywhere. So in your classrooms, let's talk to the kids and separate the kids out and put the black kids over here and the Hispanic kids over here and the white kids over here. And let's rank how oppressed you are. Now, at a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, we don't think we're oppressed. So now we're bringing in the things that aren't even there earlier. Now, whether they may do that down the road doesn't matter. Now, today, that 7-year-old did not feel oppressed. But now you're telling them that they are. And you're telling the white student that you're an oppressor and your parents have oppressed his parents. So now you need to address your life differently. So how is that beneficial to anyone? So those people who want that obviously don't want actual equality. And nowadays they're openly saying they don't want equality. They need equity to fix ththings.
And that's Ibram X. Kendi. He says the way to resolve past discrimination is present discrimination, and the way to resolve present discrimination is future discrimination. So they're openly calling for discrimination. It's just, as you said earlier, they're the ones who are now calling the shots on who to discriminate against. Mm-hmm. You mentioned, let's go down that road a little more.
Okay.
My oldest son's 4. He's about to start school in a couple months here. And I'm just trying to think of what this does to little boys and girls, 5 years old to 10 years old to 18 years old. What it does when we teach them that, oh, because you're black or brown or whatever, you're oppressed. You have no hope. You can't make it. Everything's stacked against you, right? And then what does it do down the road to white kids when we tell them you're bad, you did wrong, you're evil, right? You're the cause of all the problems. You're oppressive. Right. Where does that lead us and if you can answer that, maybe it's like an individual person, where does that put them? And then as a country, where does that lead us, 10, 20, 50 years down the road?
Right. Regardless of what you're trying to fix, it can't be good. And here's a great example of each. One, my simple answer is I say what you get are depressed whites and angry blacks. But let me go in deeper. So, for the white kid, you're going to be told, if you told this constantly, you're going to feel that you have an unfair burden that you need to fix for things that you had no control over. But what does it also say to the black kid? So we know they're right about some things. They're right that there's a disproportionate, outcome. And in a lot of cases, blacks are on the shorter end of the sticks, and we need to fix that education for blacks. So if I give them their argument, I say, how do I fix that? Do I fix that by telling blacks that they are oppressed and that the country is against them? Or do I fix that by teaching them STEM and focusing on the things that would help them create more opportunity? So one example is, my kid is in kindergarten, and he came home with an assignment, and they were talking about, they were going to teach STEM to kindergartners. I was like, that's great. But when I saw the assignments, they were talking about traditionally marginalized people being blacks and women. So I said, if you're teaching them STEM, why don't you actually teach them STEM? And they were like, well, it's true that they're marginalized, and we need them to know that. I'm like, they're 5. No, you don't. And so I also said, so if you're in a mixed class where the black kid is one of the few kids in the class, then they're not dumb. So when you say you're not talking about my kid, you're not telling my son that he's less than. Say, but he's not a dumb kid. So if you used to say blacks are traditionally marginalized, blacks struggle, blacks can't be scientists, and he looks around the room and he's the only black kid in the room, don't you think he's going to hear that it's harder for you to become a scientist? I want you to tell him he can become a scientist. Don't tell him he can't become a scientist because some random ghost of a white man doesn't want him to be a scientist. It's silly. And if you really want to fix that, the best way is, we all know, regardless of your political ideology, we all know that there are very few, if any, unemployed engineers, doctors, and accountants. So why don't you just make more black people engineers, doctors, and accountants? But instead, they're going to tell them how what happened in 1843 is going to stop them from getting ahead today. So what it does for society is it stifles society, and it helps other countries advance ahead of us because they don't have this albatross hanging around across their necks, and they're not worried about that. They're worried about achieving, which we used to be and we are no longer focused on.
So good. How are you? I've been reading and listening to a lot more from black intellectuals. The great Thomas Sowell and John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry and all these great men. There's many more. Shelby Steele.
Yeah. All members of 1776 Unites, like me and Wilfred Riley, Yahya Fanusi. Read them all.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah, we got a book coming out, Red, White, and Black, where all of our essays are compiled. You should probably check that out as well.
So good. Definitely will. How have you personally been treated in the black community when you come out and you speak this truth, as opposed to what is being parroted by so many?
I love that you say that, because I get so excited when I say that, because people are surprised by my answer. Great. I am treated phenomenally. I don't get the attacks that black conservatives say they get. Many do. Well, one, I'm not a Republican, so they don't attack me on politics. I never talk politics. I talk culture, because that's what's going to kill us. It's going to be culture, education, and the race theory. And to be honest, most black people don't agree. But I mean, the critical race theory people are a small percentage of loud, squeaky wheels. It's not the majority. Now, some people, because we're all humans, we're all flawed. So if we think something's going to benefit us, there'll be cash at the end of the this rainbow. Some people might be like, in reality, I don't believe we're all oppressed. But if it's going to get some of us better jobs, or it's going to give us money raining down from the government, I'll take it. But even if we disagree on that premise, but even they will honestly say, but no, I'm not impressed. Not oppressed, I'm sorry. So I don't get attacked because what I'm saying is just so common sense. If I tell you as a black person, you're like, well, yeah, but we need to be together. We need to improve the black community. And I say, how do we do that if the white kids are teaching their kids STEM and coding and we're teaching our kids that we're oppressed? They agree. If I say that the most important thing to do is to focus on what we can control and not be afraid of white people, they agree. So there's nothing for them to disagree with me on unless they want to admit that they're still oppressed and there's certain things they can't do. And most middle class blacks and blacks over 30 are not going to sit around and admit that there are things that they cannot do.
So good. All right, my last question for you, Mr. Love. All these lies are based on a kernel of truth. I think that's true for most lies, right? Mm-hmm. So there's what is an element of truth to the critical race theory people that they're basing all this on? Well, and how do you address the proper perspective of that? Sorry, and how do you address that? How would you rebuke that properly?
Right. Well, that's why my approach for the last year I shifted a bit, and it's all about giving them their argument. So I will never get into a debate about a Republican or a Democrat, or I'll never get into a debate about whether there was slavery or what blacks do. I just simply say, so your argument is because there was slavery or because, so they talk about the system. I say the system is not racist, so we get into that debate. But I'm not saying that the things that they use as examples aren't true, but they're examples of people being racist, but people are flawed. So you say, but the laws got passed in the 1800s. But the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence didn't say any of those things. You had a group of racist people who assumed power, and they passed laws based on what they felt. So it has nothing to do with the system. So today, it goes to another tenet of critical race theory. It says that equality, meritocracy, all those things, this is the reason why they ask for equity, is not fair. What they say is that if you pass a law that doesn't seem racist, but if it disproportionately affects somebody, then it's racist by default. But everything disproportionately affects people. Locking up people who break the law, violent criminals, disproportionately affects men. It's not an anti-man law. It's an anti-criminal law, and men are more likely to break that law. So that's how you have to approach it. You have to say, what is the solution? Because they never have solutions to anything. So what do you want to do to fix it? So the white man is racist. What do you want to do? They have no answers. They just want to be angry.
Which is the psychology of it all, which I think is the root thing that we need to get to as well. Charles, we got to run. Awesome to talk to you. I hope we can do it again. The Charles Love Show, AM 560 on The Answer, and book coming out in a couple months here, Race Crazy. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. I appreciate it.